Tonight, we will walk together through ancient Buddhist wisdom and discover how to find peace not by escaping the difficulties of life, but by transforming our relationship with them entirely. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. We all encounter challenges. We all meet people who test our patience and situations that shake our calm. This is simply part of being human. Yet the great teachers throughout history have shown us that these very difficulties can become doorways to deeper understanding, greater compassion, and lasting inner peace. These are not complicated lessons to memorize or techniques to master. They are simple truths carried in stories that have brought comfort to countless people before you. Unshakable peace was never something to achieve, but something to uncover. So let your shoulders soften. Allow your breath to deepen. There is nowhere else you need to be right now, and nothing you need to figure out. Simply listen and let these teachings settle into you like rain soaking into earth. Take a slow, deep breath. Let's begin our journey together. There is a question that has troubled human hearts since the beginning of time. Why do some difficulties seem to grow larger the more we struggle against them? Why do certain problems refuse to shrink, no matter how forcefully we push them away? These questions touch something deep within our experience. We have all known the frustration of watching a small irritation grow into a great disturbance, simply because we could not let it be. We have all felt the weight of conflict become heavier in our chests as we fought harder to be free of it. The ancient teachers understood this pattern well. They observed human nature with great care and patience, watching how we create our own suffering through the very efforts we make to escape it. And in their compassion, they left us teachings and stories to illuminate a different way. The Buddha spoke often of this truth. He taught that hatred is never ended by hatred, but only by love. This is an eternal law. These words, simple as they are, contain a medicine for much of what troubles us. They point toward a way of being that transforms difficulty at its root, rather than merely managing its symptoms. Let us discover what happens when we stop fighting what disturbs us and begin, instead, to welcome it with an open heart. When something unpleasant enters our life, our first instinct is almost always to push it away. This is natural. This is human. When we touch something hot, we pull back our hand. When we taste something bitter, we spit it out. The body knows how to protect itself, and this knowledge runs deep. But the mind is not the body, and the difficulties we face in our relationships, our emotions, and our inner life do not always respond to pushing in the way we expect. In fact, something curious often happens. The more we push, the more we struggle, the more firmly the difficulty seems to plant itself in our experience. Consider how this works with worry. When a troubling thought arises and we try to force it from our mind, what happens? For most of us, the thought returns stronger than before. It is as though our resistance has given it energy, fed it somehow, made it more substantial and more persistent. The same pattern appears with difficult emotions. When anger arises and we tell ourselves we should not be angry, when we clench our teeth and try to suppress the feeling, it often burns hotter beneath the surface. When fear comes and we berate ourselves for being afraid, the fear frequently deepens into something closer to panic. And so it is with difficult people. When someone irritates us and we respond with hardness, with coldness, With our own brand of difficulty, we rarely see improvement. Instead, we often watch the situation worsen. The other person becomes more defensive, more hostile, more entrenched in the very behavior that troubled us to begin with. There is an old teaching that says what we resist persists. This is not merely a clever phrase. It points towards something real in the nature of experience. Our resistance itself becomes a kind of food for what we resist. Our struggle becomes the very fuel that keeps the fire burning. But if resistance feeds difficulty, what might happen if we tried something else entirely? What if, instead of pushing against what troubles us, we learned to open toward it? What if we discovered how to welcome even the unwelcome? This is the radical invitation at the heart of the Buddha's teaching. Not to become passive or weak. Not to allow ourselves to be harmed without response. But to recognize that true strength often looks different than we imagine. True power sometimes means setting down the sword and opening our arms instead. Let us explore a story that has been told for many generations, a tale that carries within it seeds of profound wisdom. It is said that this story comes from the time of the Buddha himself, though it has been retold in many forms across the centuries. Listen now and let the images settle gently into your heart. Once, in a distant land, there stood a magnificent palace at the center of a great kingdom. The palace was known throughout the realm for its beauty and its peace. Tall columns of polished stone rose toward painted ceilings. Gardens filled with fragrant flowers surrounded quiet courtyards where fountains sang softly through the day and night. Those who lived and worked within these walls moved with a certain grace, for the kingdom was prosperous and the times were good. The ruler of this kingdom was known far and wide as a wise and gentle sovereign. Through years of careful study and deep reflection, this ruler had cultivated a heart of unusual kindness. Advisors came from distant lands, seeking counsel. Common folk felt at ease in the royal presence. Even the servants spoke of their sovereign with genuine warmth, for they were treated not as lesser beings but as members of one great household. On a particular day, however, the wise ruler was away from the palace, attending to matters in a distant province. The hall stood quiet in the afternoon light. Ministers went about their duties. Guards kept their posts. The great throne room, with its high windows and ancient tapestries, sat empty and still. It was into this peaceful scene that something unexpected arrived. No one could say later exactly how it began. Perhaps a shadow fell across the courtyard that should not have been there. Perhaps a cold wind stirred the curtains in rooms where no window was open. But somehow, without warning, a creature appeared in the outer halls of the palace. It was unlike anything the palace dwellers had ever seen. To call it a demon is to use the word that the old stories use. But perhaps we might also call it the embodiment of all that is difficult and unwelcome in life. It was not large at first. It stood perhaps the height of a young child. But there was something deeply unsettling about it, something that made the stomach clench and the heart beat faster. Those who first encountered this creature in the outer halls froze where they stood. Some could not move at all. Others backed away slowly, their hands raised as though to ward off something they could not name. And in the confusion that followed, the creature simply walked forward, passing through doorway after doorway, moving ever closer to the heart of the palace. It walked through the Hall of Ancestors, where portraits of generations past watched in silent dignity. It passed through the Chamber of Scrolls, where the kingdom's laws and histories were carefully preserved. It climbed the wide stairs that led to the throne room itself, leaving behind it a faint trail of dampness on the polished floors. And there, in the great throne room, beneath the high windows where the afternoon light fell in golden shafts, the creature did something extraordinary. It walked directly to the throne, the ancient seat of the kingdom's rulers, and it sat down. When the guards finally recovered from their shock, when the ministers and advisors gathered their courage and entered the throne room, they found the creature sitting calmly on the throne, as though it had every right to be there, as though it belonged. The sight was intolerable. The throne was sacred. It represented everything the kingdom held dear. To see this unwelcome being, this offensive creature, sitting in the place of their beloved ruler, filled the gathered officials with a fury they could barely contain. One of the senior ministers was the first to speak. His voice trembled with outrage. "How dare you enter this place?" he said. "How dare you sit where you do not belong? Leave at once or face the consequences." The words hung in the air of the great room. And then something remarkable happened. Something that no one expected. The creature seemed to grow. Not quickly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Where it had been the height of a child, it was now the height of a youth. Its form became more solid, more substantial. The smell that emanated from it grew stronger, and its eyes, already cold, seemed to darken further. The officials exchanged glances of alarm. Perhaps harsher words were needed. "You are not welcome in this sacred place," said a military commander, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "We will drive you out by force if necessary." Again the creature grew. It was now the size of a full-grown man. The tapestries on the walls seemed to shrink in its presence. The golden light from the windows seemed to dim. The response came swiftly. More guards were summoned. More voices raised in anger. Threats were made. Weapons were drawn. The air in the throne room grew thick with hostility, with the desire to destroy this unwanted presence, to restore the peace by whatever means necessary. And with each angry word, each hostile gesture, each hateful thought that arose in the minds of those gathered, the creature grew larger. It was now taller than any person in the room. Its head approached the ceiling. The smell had become almost unbearable, a stench that made eyes water and stomachs turn. And from its mouth there now came sounds, low and guttural, words in no language anyone could recognize, but carrying a tone of malice that needed no translation. This went on for some time. The officials tried everything they could think of. They tried intimidation. They tried bargaining. They tried pleading. But nothing worked except to make matters worse. By the time hours had passed, the creature had grown so enormous that it filled nearly half the throne room. Its misshapen form pressed against the ancient columns. Its breath fogged the high windows. And the gathered assembly had backed against the far wall, terrified and exhausted, completely at a loss. It was at this moment that the wise ruler returned. Word had reached the distant province that something was amiss at the palace. The journey back had been swift, driven by concern for the kingdom and its people. But when the ruler finally entered the throne room, nothing could have prepared anyone for what followed. The ruler stood for a long moment in the doorway, taking in the scene. The enormous creature, the cowering officials, the atmosphere of fear and hatred that hung in the air like smoke. Something in the ruler's face shifted then, softened into an expression that those present would remember for the rest of their lives. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something closer to understanding. And then the wise ruler spoke. "Welcome, dear visitor." The words were simple, but they carried a warmth that seemed almost impossible under the circumstances. The ruler took a step forward, then another, walking calmly toward the monstrous presence that filled the room. "Thank you for coming to see me. I am only sorry that I was not here to greet you when you arrived. You must have been waiting for quite some time." Something extraordinary happened in that moment. Something that defied everything the terrified officials thought they knew about dealing with difficulty. The creature, this massive and terrible presence that had grown larger with every harsh word, began to shrink. Not by much at first, perhaps an inch or two, but unmistakably, the creature was smaller than it had been a moment before. The ruler continued forward, still speaking in that same tone of gentle welcome. "You must be tired after your journey. Please, make yourself comfortable. Is there anything I can offer you? Some water, perhaps? Something to eat?" The creature shrank again. Its eyes, which had held nothing but cold darkness, seemed to flicker with something like confusion. The officials watched in astonishment as their ruler approached the throne, showing no trace of fear, radiating only kindness. "I can see that my household has not treated you well in my absence. Please forgive them. They did not understand. They thought you were an enemy, when in fact you are my guest." With each kind word, the transformation continued. The creature that had filled half the throne room was now only the size of a large bear. Its form was becoming less solid, less threatening. The terrible smell was beginning to fade. And then something even more remarkable began to happen. Taking their cue from the ruler, the others in the room began to change their approach as well. One minister, finding courage he did not know he possessed, spoke up. "Perhaps our guest would like some tea. We have a lovely blend from the mountain provinces. Very soothing after a long journey." The creature shrank further. A servant who had been trembling in the corner came forward. "Would you like me to prepare a place for you to rest? There are comfortable quarters in the east wing." Smaller still, another official joined in. "Please know that you are welcome here. We did not mean to be unkind. We were simply surprised. Forgive us." And so it went. One by one, the members of the household released their fear and hostility. One by one, they offered words of welcome, gestures of kindness, the simple hospitality that any guest deserves. And with each offering, the creature diminished further. Some brought food, the finest delicacies the palace kitchens could provide. Others brought soft blankets and cushions. One young servant, filled with compassion she could not explain, knelt before the creature and began to gently massage its feet, which by now had shrunk to nearly normal size. The creature that had seemed so terrible, so impossibly huge and threatening, was now no larger than a small dog. Its features had softened. The darkness in its eyes had given way to something almost like wonder, and the smell that had been so offensive had transformed into something almost sweet, like rain on dry earth. Finally, as the last acts of kindness were offered, as the last words of welcome were spoken, the creature gave something that might have been a sigh. And then, quietly, without drama or fanfare, It simply faded away. Where there had been a monster, there was only empty air. The throne room was peaceful once more. This story, it is said, comes from the Buddha's own collection of teachings. He called such beings anger-eating demons. They are creatures that grow strong on the energy of hostility, that feed on our resistance, as fire feeds on dry wood. And the only way to overcome them is not through force, which only makes them stronger, but through kindness, which starves them of their food. But we need not think of actual demons to find the truth in this tale. Look at your own life. Look at the difficulties you face, the people who trouble you, the situations that refuse to improve no matter how hard you struggle against them. How often have you met difficulty with resistance, only to watch it grow? How often have you faced a challenging person with coldness or anger, only to see them become more challenging still? How often have you tried to force a problem to go away, only to find it more firmly planted than before? The anger-eating demon lives in our relationships. It lives in our workplaces and our homes. It lives in the conflicts we carry within our own hearts. And it grows stronger every time we feed it with our hostility. But there is good news in this teaching. Just as the demon grows with anger, it shrinks with kindness. Just as resistance feeds difficulty, acceptance transforms it. We have within us, at every moment, the power to choose which way we will go. This does not mean we must become doormats. It does not mean we allow ourselves to be harmed without response. The wise ruler in our story did not pretend the demon was not there, did not ignore its presence or deny its reality. Rather, the ruler met reality as it was, but chose to meet it with kindness rather than hatred. This is the true meaning of strength. Not the power to destroy what troubles us, but the wisdom to transform it through the quality of our response. How might we apply this ancient wisdom to our modern lives? Begin by noticing. Simply notice, with gentle curiosity, how you typically respond when difficulty arises. When a person annoys you, what happens in your body? What thoughts arise in your mind? What words come to your lips? There is no need to judge what you find. Simply observe, as you might observe clouds passing across the sky. Then, in a moment of difficulty, see if you can pause before responding. This pause is precious. In that small gap between stimulus and response lies all of our freedom. In that moment of stillness, we can choose. Try, just once, responding to difficulty with welcome instead of resistance. This might feel strange at first. It might feel unnatural, even foolish. But watch what happens. Watch how the difficulty responds when you do not feed it with your hostility. You might say inwardly, "Welcome, difficulty. I see you are here. I will not fight you." You might offer kindness to a challenging person, not because they deserve it, but because you understand that kindness is the only thing that truly works. You might simply soften your body, release the tension in your jaw and shoulders, and breathe. The Buddha taught that we are not punished for our anger. We are punished by our anger. Our hostility harms us more than it harms anyone else. When we learn to set it down, we free ourselves from a burden we may have been carrying for a very long time. The demons of difficulty will continue to arrive in our lives. This is simply the nature of being human. But we need not let them grow to fill our entire throne room. We need not exhaust ourselves fighting what cannot be overcome by force. Instead, we can welcome them. We can offer them tea. We can speak to them with kindness. And we can watch with wonder as they slowly fade away. Let us rest here for a moment. Allow these teachings to settle gently into your heart. Take a slow, nourishing breath. And when you are ready, we will continue our journey together. We have seen how kindness can transform even the most frightening difficulty, how welcome can dissolve what resistance only strengthens. But there is another question that arises naturally from this understanding. If we are to welcome difficulty rather than fight it, what exactly are we welcoming? What is the purpose of these unwanted visitors in our lives? The ancient teachers offer us a surprising answer. They suggest that the very things we wish would go away, the irritations and obstacles and challenging presences in our lives, are not meaningless intrusions at all. They are teachers. They carry lessons we could never learn from comfort alone. This is not easy to accept at first. When we are struggling with a difficult situation or a challenging person, the last thing we want to hear is that this struggle is somehow good for us. We want relief, not instruction. We want escape, not education. And yet, if we look honestly at our own growth, at the moments in our lives when we truly deepened in wisdom and compassion, we often find that these moments did not come during times of ease. They came during times of difficulty. They came when we were stretched beyond what we thought we could bear and discovered that we could bear it after all. There is a saying that has been passed down through generations of practitioners. Whatever irritates you, whatever troubles you, that is your teacher. These simple words contain a revolution in how we might approach the difficulties of life. Consider what this means. The coworker who tests your patience is not simply an obstacle to your happiness. They are offering you an opportunity to develop patience you did not know you had. The situation that refuses to go as planned is not merely a frustration. It is a chance to practice flexibility, acceptance, the art of letting go. This does not mean we should seek out difficulty or manufacture problems where none exist. Life provides more than enough challenges without our adding to them. But when difficulty comes, as it inevitably will, we can choose how to receive it. We can see it as an enemy to be defeated, or we can see it as a teacher to be honored. The difference in these two approaches is profound. When we fight our teachers, we learn nothing. We exhaust ourselves in battle and emerge no wiser than before. But when we bow to our teachers, when we approach them with the humility of a student, something opens within us. We begin to receive what they have to offer. The Buddha himself pointed toward this truth when he spoke of the value of noble friendship and wise companionship. But he also recognized that those who challenge us play an essential role in our development. An enemy who helps you grow, it has been said, is more valuable than a friend who keeps you comfortable. This is challenging wisdom. It asks us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about what is good for us and what is harmful. Think of the people in your life who have helped you grow the most. Were they all kind to you? Were they all easy to be with? Or did some of your greatest growth come from those who challenged you, who pushed against your edges, who refused to let you remain small and comfortable? The nice people in our lives, the easy circumstances, the times when everything flows smoothly, these are pleasant. We enjoy them, and rightly so. But they rarely transform us. They rarely call forth capacities we did not know we possessed. For that kind of deep change, we often need a different kind of teacher. Let us explore a story from a monastery nestled in distant mountains. In this place, surrounded by pine forests and rushing streams, a small community of practitioners lived together in simplicity. They had come from different places and different walks of life, united by a common wish to deepen in wisdom and find lasting peace. One young practitioner had arrived at the monastery with great hopes. She had read the ancient teachings and felt her heart stir with longing for the tranquility they described. She imagined herself meditating in peaceful halls, sharing gentle conversation with like-minded souls, growing steadily in understanding and compassion. The reality, as it often is, proved somewhat different. The monastery was indeed beautiful. The teachings were profound. But living in close community brought challenges she had not anticipated. Sharing small spaces, following strict schedules, having little privacy or time alone, and most challenging of all, living alongside people she had not chosen, people with habits and personalities very different from her own. One fellow practitioner in particular seemed to test her at every turn. This person, who had lived at the monastery for many years, had a manner that the young woman found almost unbearable. They spoke too loudly during quiet hours. They offered unsolicited advice on everything from meditation posture to how to wash the dishes. They had opinions on every topic and shared them freely, whether anyone wished to hear them or not. Worst of all, they seemed completely unaware of the irritation they caused, moving through the community with a cheerful obliviousness that somehow made everything worse. The young practitioner tried to avoid this person, but in a small monastery, avoidance was nearly impossible. They ate at the same table. They meditated in the same hall. They worked side by side in the garden and the kitchen. No matter where she turned, there they were. She found herself growing bitter. I came here to find peace, she thought, and instead I have found this person. How can anyone make progress with such a disturbance in their midst? After several months of struggle, the young woman approached one of the elder teachers at the monastery. She poured out her frustrations, describing in detail all the ways this difficult person made her life unpleasant. Surely, she thought, the teacher would understand. Perhaps they would speak to this person, ask them to be more considerate. Perhaps they would allow her to move to a different part of the monastery, away from this constant irritation. The elder listened patiently to everything she had to say. When she finished, the teacher was quiet for a long moment. Then they smiled gently. "What a blessing," the elder said, "to have such a teacher living among us." The young woman stared. "A teacher? This person teaches nothing but frustration. And what greater teaching could there be?" The elder replied, "You came here to learn patience, did you not? How will you learn patience if everything is always pleasant? You came to develop compassion. How will compassion grow if you only encounter people you find easy to love?" The elder paused, letting these words settle. There is an old saying, whatever irritates you, whatever troubles you, that is your teacher. This person you find so difficult is offering you exactly the lessons you need most. The young woman felt resistance rising in her chest. This was not what she wanted to hear. But surely there must be some peace in spiritual practice, some relief from difficulty. The peace you seek, the elder said gently, does not come from the absence of difficulty. It comes from how you meet difficulty when it arises. This person is giving you the opportunity to practice every single day. They are showing you exactly where your love has limits, exactly where your work lies. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a practice called loving-kindness meditation. In this practice, we cultivate feelings of warmth and goodwill, first toward ourselves, then toward those we love, then toward those we feel neutral about, and finally toward all beings everywhere without exception. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free from suffering. These words, repeated again and again, slowly work upon the heart like water wearing smooth as stone. Over time, they soften our habitual tendencies toward judgment and separation. They open us to a love that excludes nothing and no one. But the young woman discovered something interesting about her own practice of loving kindness. When she sat to meditate and offered these wishes of well-being to all beings, she found that she did not quite mean it. May all beings be happy, she would say, and in her heart she would add, except that one person at breakfast who talks too much. May all beings be peaceful, except that voice that interrupts my quiet contemplation. May all beings be free from suffering, but maybe that person could experience just a little discomfort, just enough to make them aware of how they affect others. She noticed this with some embarrassment. Here she was, supposedly practicing universal love, and her love had very clear boundaries. It extended to some beings but not to others. It was conditional, limited, full of exceptions. This is, perhaps, more common than we might like to admit. We all have our exceptions. We all have people we would rather not include in our circle of care. But the young woman began to see that these exceptions were not separate from her practice. They were the heart of her practice. This difficult person was showing her exactly where her love was limited, exactly where her growth needed to happen. As one teacher put it, the obstacles to our practice are the practice itself. Armed with this new understanding, the young woman decided to try something different. Instead of avoiding the difficult person or quietly resenting them, she would attempt to truly include them in her loving kindness. She would try to extend her care even to this person who had caused her such frustration. It was not easy. The first time she sat in meditation and deliberately brought this person to mind, sending them wishes of happiness and peace, something in her resisted. Her mind generated a list of all the reasons this person did not deserve her goodwill. Her body tensed with remembered irritations. But she stayed with it. She breathed gently and repeated the phrases, "May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering." Something began to shift, slowly, over many days of practice. She started to see this person differently. She noticed that beneath all their loud opinions and unsolicited advice, there was a kind of loneliness. They talked so much, perhaps, because they feared silence. They offered so much advice, perhaps, because they wanted to feel useful, to feel that they mattered. She began to see a fellow human being struggling in their own way, doing their best with the tools they had, probably unaware of the impact they had on others. And with this seeing came something unexpected. Compassion. Not approval of the behavior, not a sudden enjoyment of the loud voice and the constant commentary, but a softening toward the person beneath the behavior, an understanding that they too were carrying burdens. They too were seeking happiness in the only way they knew how. There is an image sometimes used in the contemplative traditions, of stones being polished in a river. When stones first fall into the water, they are rough and jagged, full of sharp edges. But as the river carries them along, they tumble against one another. They rub and knock and scrape. And slowly, over time, they become smooth. No stone polishes itself. It is the friction with other stones that wears away the rough edges. It is the constant contact, the rubbing and bumping, that creates the smoothness we admire. Living in community is like this. The people around us, especially the difficult ones, are constantly rubbing against our rough edges. It can feel unpleasant. We might wish for a smoother ride, a gentler journey, fewer collisions. But it is precisely this friction that polishes us, that wears away our sharp edges, that slowly reveals the smooth stone beneath. The young woman came to understand this truth through her experience at the monastery. The person she had found so irritating was, in a sense, doing her a great service. They were showing her where she was still rough, where she still had sharp edges that caught against life. They were giving her the opportunity, day after day, to practice patience, to practice letting go, to practice love without exceptions. In time, something remarkable happened. The difficult person did not change. They were still loud, still opinionated, still full of advice that no one had asked for. But the young woman's experience of them changed completely. Where there had been irritation, there was now mostly acceptance. Where there had been avoidance, there was now a kind of ease. And more than this, she found that her capacity for patience had grown. Not just with this one person, but with everyone. The friction that had seemed like punishment had turned out to be polishing. She was becoming smoother, more able to flow with life rather than catching against it. In the years that followed, this practitioner grew in depth and understanding. When newer members of the community came to her with complaints about difficult people, about irritating situations, about obstacles to their peace, she would sometimes smile in recognition. "What a blessing," she would say, "to have such teachers in your life." At first, they thought she was joking, but she was entirely serious. She had learned from her years of practice that difficulty is not the enemy of spiritual growth. It is the very ground in which growth occurs. The Buddha himself pointed to this truth when he said that an untrained mind brings suffering, but a mind well trained brings happiness. The training of the mind does not happen in easy circumstances. It happens when we are challenged, stretched, pushed beyond our comfortable limits. It happens when we meet difficulty and choose to learn from it rather than simply endure it. This does not mean we should be grateful for suffering in a superficial way, pretending that pain is pleasant or that frustration does not hurt. The difficult person still tested her patience. The challenges of community life still required effort. But within that effort, there was an invitation. Within that difficulty, there was a door. We can walk through that door if we choose. We can bow to our teachers, even the unwanted ones, and say, "Thank you. I am ready to learn." How might we begin to see our difficulties as teachers? The next time you encounter an irritation, a minor frustration, something that disrupts your peace, you might pause before you react. Take a breath and ask yourself, with genuine curiosity, what might this be teaching me? Perhaps the slow driver in front of you is teaching patience. Perhaps the interruption to your plans is teaching flexibility. Perhaps the person who criticizes you is teaching you not to depend so heavily on others' opinions. Perhaps your own restless mind is teaching you how much work remains to be done. We cannot always see the teaching in the moment. Sometimes it becomes clear only later, in retrospect, when we look back and understand how that difficult time shaped us. But we can begin to cultivate the attitude of a student, the willingness to learn, the humility to admit that we do not know everything and that life may have wisdom to offer that we have not yet received. The great teachers throughout history have all spoken of this truth in their own ways. They have encouraged us to embrace difficulty rather than flee from it, to see obstacles as opportunities, to understand that the path to freedom leads directly through the things we would rather avoid. You need not love your difficulties. You need not pretend they are pleasant when they are not. But you can begin to respect them. You can begin to bow to them as teachers. You can begin to say, I see you. I am willing to learn from you. Please teach me what I need to know. In this willingness lies a kind of freedom. We are no longer victims of circumstance, buffeted helplessly by whatever life brings. We become students of life, active participants in our own growth, capable of finding meaning and wisdom even in the most unlikely places, even in the presence of someone who tests our patience. Even there, especially there, the teaching awaits. Let us pause here and rest. Allow your breath to flow naturally, without effort. Feel whatever you feel in this moment, welcoming it all. And when you are ready, we will continue on together, deeper into the heart of peace. We have begun to see how difficulty can become a teacher, how the very people who test our patience may be offering us exactly the lessons we most need to learn. But there is another doorway into peace with difficult people, one that requires not effort or practice, but simply a shift in how we see. This shift is the gift of understanding. It is the capacity to step, even briefly, into another person's experience, to wonder what it might be like to be them, to sense, even dimly, the weight they carry that we cannot see. When this shift happens, something remarkable occurs. The irritation we felt begins to soften. The wall between us and the difficult person becomes thinner, more transparent. We start to see not an obstacle to our happiness, but a fellow human being, struggling just as we struggle, seeking peace just as we seek peace. The Buddha spoke often of compassion as one of the highest qualities a human being can develop. But compassion is not possible without understanding. We cannot truly care for someone whose experience remains completely foreign to us. The path to compassion runs through the territory of empathy, through the willingness to imagine what life might be like from inside another person's skin. There is a reflection that has helped many people transform their relationship with difficult people. It is not complicated. It requires no special training or preparation. It is simply this: when you encounter someone who troubles you, someone whose behavior is irritating or hurtful or simply hard to bear, pause for a moment and consider. You only have to endure this person for a short time. Perhaps a few minutes. Perhaps an hour. Perhaps, if they are very close to you, a few hours each day. But they have to live with themselves all day long. Let this sink in. Whatever quality makes this person difficult for you to be around, they experience that quality constantly. They wake up with it. They carry it through every moment of their day. They go to sleep with it. There is no escape for them, no relief, no moment when they can walk away and be free. If someone's manner is abrasive, imagine what it must be like to have that abrasiveness as your constant companion. If someone is anxious and fearful, imagine living inside that anxiety every waking moment. If someone is angry and reactive, imagine the exhaustion of that anger burning in your chest hour after hour, day after day. This reflection does not excuse harmful behavior. It does not mean we should allow ourselves to be mistreated, but it opens a door to compassion that was previously closed. It helps us see that the difficult person is not our enemy. They are, in a very real sense, suffering. And their suffering is far greater than ours because they can never get away from it. Consider for a moment what it might be like to be someone that others find difficult. Imagine going through life and sensing, even if only dimly, that people avoid you. That conversations grow shorter when you join them. That invitations somehow never quite reach you. That there is always a slight tension in the room when you enter. Most difficult people are not deliberately trying to cause problems. They are simply being who they are, responding to life with the tools they have, unaware of how their presence affects others. And yet they often sense, on some level, that something is wrong. That connection does not come easily. That the warmth others seem to share does not flow toward them in the same way. This is a kind of loneliness that is hard to imagine unless you have experienced it. To want connection and not know how to create it. To reach out and find others pulling back. To be, in some fundamental way, isolated even in the midst of people. When we see difficult people in this light, our hearts begin to open. We recognize that their difficulty is not a weapon aimed at us. It is a burden they carry, often without knowing how to set it down. It is a wound that has never healed, expressing itself in ways that push away the very connection they most need. The Buddha taught that all beings wish to be happy. All beings wish to be free from suffering. This is as true for the difficult person as it is for anyone else. They are not seeking to make life harder for those around them. They are seeking happiness, seeking peace, seeking love. They have simply not found skillful ways to pursue these things. When we remember this, when we hold this truth in our hearts as we encounter difficult people, something shifts. The irritation does not disappear entirely, but it is joined by something softer. A recognition of shared humanity. A tenderness toward this fellow traveler who has lost their way. Let us explore a story from a place of healing, a hospital in a distant city where people came to find help for troubles of the mind and heart. This was a place of last resort for many, a sanctuary for those whose inner storms had grown too fierce to weather alone. The doctors and nurses and caregivers who worked in this place were dedicated people. They had trained for many years to understand the complexities of the human mind. They knew the names and symptoms of many conditions. They had medicines and therapies and techniques to offer those who came seeking help. But for a long time, despite all their knowledge and good intentions, progress was slow. Patients would arrive in crisis, receive treatment, stabilize somewhat, and then return again when the next crisis came. The cycle seemed endless. The healers were doing everything they knew to do, yet true and lasting healing remained elusive. Then something changed. A new approach was introduced, one that seemed almost too simple to work. Instead of focusing primarily on what was wrong with each patient, the caregivers began to focus on what was right. This requires some explanation. When someone is struggling with troubles of the mind, Their experience is not uniform. There are times when the storm is raging, when thoughts become confused and feelings become overwhelming. But there are also times of calm, periods when clarity returns and the person can think and feel and relate in ways that feel healthy and whole. Previously, the caregivers had focused most of their attention on the storms. They watched carefully for signs of trouble. They intervened when symptoms flared. They built their understanding of each patient around the patterns of their illness. The new approach turned this around. Instead of watching for storms, the caregivers began to watch for sunshine. They paid attention to the moments when patients were calm, when they were connecting well with others, when they showed insight and wisdom and grace. And rather than simply noting these moments and waiting for them to pass, they celebrated them. They named them. They helped patients recognize and value these experiences of wellness. What happened next surprised many who witnessed it. As the caregivers shifted their attention toward moments of wellness, those moments began to expand. Patients who had been trapped in cycles of crisis began to experience longer and longer periods of stability. The storms still came, but they came less often and lasted for shorter times. The spaces of peace between them grew wider and wider. This was not magic, though it might have seemed that way. It was simply the natural result of a profound truth. What we give attention to grows. When we focus on what is wrong, on the difficulties and deficiencies and problems in ourselves or others, we are in a sense feeding those things. Our attention is a kind of nourishment. It strengthens whatever it touches. By constantly attending to illness, the caregivers had been inadvertently giving illness more power, more presence, more weight in their patient's experience. But attention works the other way as well. When we focus on what is right, on the moments of health and clarity and connection, we nourish those things instead. We help them grow stronger. We give them more power to hold their ground against the storms. This is not positive thinking in a superficial sense. It is not pretending that difficulties do not exist. The caregivers did not ignore their patients' struggles or dismiss their pain. They simply chose to also see, and to help their patients see, the health that existed alongside the illness. They chose to nurture what was already whole, rather than only fighting what was broken. The ancient teachers understood this principle well. The Buddha spoke of cultivating wholesome states of mind, of deliberately nurturing qualities like kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. He knew that the mind, like a garden, grows whatever is planted and tended. If we plant seeds of awareness around our difficulties and water them daily with our attention, those difficulties will flourish. But if we plant seeds of awareness around our moments of peace and wisdom, those will flourish instead. This same principle applies to how we see difficult people. When we focus on their difficulties, on the ways they irritate us, on their faults and failings and frustrating habits, we are in a sense strengthening those qualities in our perception. We are building a picture of this person that consists primarily of their shadows. And then we wonder why they seem so dark to us. But everyone, even the most difficult person, has moments of light. Everyone has qualities that are admirable, even if those qualities are hidden or rarely expressed. Everyone has within them the capacity for kindness, for wisdom, for connection. The question is whether we can see these things, or whether our focus on difficulties has blinded us to them. There is a practice sometimes called looking for the Buddha nature in others. In this practice, we deliberately search for the light in each person we encounter. We ask ourselves, what is good in this person? What do they do well? What qualities do they have that I might admire? This is not about making excuses for bad behavior or pretending that difficulties do not exist. It is about expanding our vision so that we see the whole person, not just the parts that trouble us. It is about remembering that every human being is a complex mixture of light and shadow, and choosing to give our attention to the light. When we practice this way of seeing, something remarkable happens. The person does not change, but our experience of them transforms. We begin to notice things we had missed before. Small kindnesses, moments of insight, flashes of humor or generosity or courage. The difficult person becomes more three-dimensional in our perception, more human, more like us. And often, as we shift our attention toward what is good in someone, they seem to shift as well. Not because they are aware of our inner practice, but because of how our changed perception changes our behavior toward them. We become warmer, more open, more willing to engage. And they, sensing this shift, often respond in kind. The light we were looking for begins to appear more frequently, nurtured by our attention and our care. Let us return to the reflection we began with. The difficult person has to live with themselves all day long. But there is more to this truth than simply the weight of their own difficult qualities. Consider also the loneliness. Most people who struggle to connect with others are aware, at some level, that something is wrong. They see others forming friendships easily. They watch as invitations flow to everyone but them. They feel the subtle ways that people withdraw from their presence. This awareness, even when it is buried beneath defenses and denial, creates a deep kind of pain. It is the pain of isolation, of not belonging, of being somehow outside the circle of warmth that most humans need to thrive. When we see difficult people with this understanding, our hearts cannot help but soften. We recognize that their difficulty is not a sign of strength, but of struggle. It is not an attack, but a wound. They are not our enemies, but our fellow sufferers, caught in patterns they may not know how to escape. The Buddha taught that compassion naturally arises when we truly see another being suffering. We do not have to manufacture it or force it. We simply have to see clearly. And when we see clearly the suffering that lies beneath difficult behavior, compassion arises on its own. This compassion is not weak or passive. It does not mean allowing ourselves to be harmed or staying in situations that damage us. But it changes the quality of our response. Instead of reacting with anger or resentment, we can respond with firmness that is also kind. We can set boundaries without hatred. We can protect ourselves without adding to the other person's burden of isolation and pain. There is a reason why being truly seen by another person feels so healing. When someone looks at us and sees not just our difficulties but also our light, something deep within us relaxes. We feel less alone. We feel that perhaps we are not as broken as we feared. Difficult people rarely receive this gift. Most of the eyes that look at them see only the difficulty. They are defined by their worst qualities, reduced to the problems they cause. Is it any wonder that they have trouble changing when everyone around them has already decided who they are? But when someone chooses to see differently, when someone looks for the light and reflects it back, change becomes possible. The difficult person begins to glimpse a different version of themselves. They begin to believe that, perhaps, They could be other than they have been. They find, in the seeing of another, the hope they need to begin the hard work of transformation. This is a gift we can offer. It costs us nothing but a shift in attention, a willingness to look for what is good. And yet, it may be one of the most valuable gifts a human being can receive. We are not responsible for fixing difficult people. We are not required to stay in harmful situations or sacrifice our own well-being for others. But we can choose, when it is safe to do so, to offer the gift of seeing, to look for the Buddha nature in even the most challenging person, to remember that beneath all the difficulty, there is a human heart that longs for connection, for understanding, for peace. How might we bring this understanding into our daily lives? The next time you encounter someone difficult, you might pause and consider, they have to live with themselves all day long. Let yourself feel, even briefly, what that might be like. Let compassion arise naturally from this understanding. Then, if you are willing, try the practice of looking for light. Ask yourself, what might be good in this person? What strengths do they have? What might they be struggling with that you cannot see? How might they be suffering beneath the surface of their difficult behavior? You need not share these reflections with the person. You need not change your boundaries or accept behavior that harms you. This is an inner practice, a shift in how you see, not necessarily a change in what you do. But notice what happens as you practice. Notice how your experience of the difficult person begins to shift. Notice how the weight of irritation becomes lighter. Notice how compassion begins to arise, softening the hard edges of your response. And notice, too, how this practice changes you. How it opens your heart not just to this one person, but to the struggles of all beings. How it connects you to the great web of human suffering and human hope that we all share. We are all doing our best. We are all struggling. We are all seeking happiness and so often missing the mark. When we remember this, when we hold this truth in our hearts, the whole world begins to look different. The difficult people become less like obstacles and more like mirrors, reflecting back to us our shared humanity, our shared vulnerability, our shared wish to find peace. Let us rest here for a moment. Breathe gently. Let your heart soften toward all beings, including yourself. And when you are ready, we will continue together. We have seen how understanding can open our hearts to difficult people, how seeing their suffering can awaken compassion within us. But there is a question that naturally follows. Can kindness actually change things? Can our gentle persistence truly transform a relationship that seems beyond hope? The honest answer is that it is not always easy. Some people have built such thick walls around their hearts that our kindness seems to bounce off without effect. Some situations are so entrenched that change appears impossible. And there are times when the wisest course is to step back, to protect ourselves, to accept that not every battle is ours to fight. And yet, there are also stories of remarkable transformation, stories of the hardest hearts slowly softening under the patient warmth of kindness, stories of walls coming down, one brick at a time, over weeks and months and years. These stories remind us that change is always possible, even when it seems most unlikely. The path of kindness is not a quick fix. It is a long road, requiring patience we did not know we had. But for those willing to walk it, the destination can be more beautiful than we ever imagined. In our world of instant messages and rapid results, we have grown accustomed to quick solutions. We want our problems solved now, our relationships healed today, our difficult people transformed by next week at the latest. When change does not come quickly, we often conclude that it is not coming at all. But the deepest changes in human beings rarely happen quickly. A heart that has been closed for years does not open overnight. Trust that has been broken many times is not rebuilt with a single gesture. The patterns of a lifetime do not dissolve at the first touch of kindness. This is not a reason for despair. It is simply the nature of things. A great tree does not grow in a day. A river does not carve a canyon in a season. The most profound transformations in nature happen slowly, imperceptibly, through the patient accumulation of small moments. So it is with human hearts. The kindness we offer today may seem to disappear without trace. The kindness we offer tomorrow may meet the same fate. But somewhere beneath the surface, something is shifting. Each act of warmth is like a drop of water falling on stone. No single drop seems to make a difference. But over time, the stone begins to wear. Over time, the impossible becomes possible. The Buddha understood this well. He taught that our actions, even the smallest ones, have consequences that ripple outward in ways we cannot see. A kind word spoken today may bear fruit years from now in circumstances we will never witness. Our task is not to demand immediate results, but to plant seeds of goodness and trust in the harvest. Let us explore a story from a place of confinement, a large institution where people lived under strict rules and watchful eyes. This was not an easy place to be. The residents had made mistakes in their lives and were paying the price. The days were long and structured. Freedom was limited, and the relationship between those in charge and those in their care was often marked by distance and suspicion. In this place, there was a man whose job was simple. Each day, he would prepare and serve tea and coffee to the officers who ran the institution. It was not demanding work, but it brought him into daily contact with one officer in particular, the chief of the facility. This chief officer was, by all accounts, a difficult man. He seemed to take pleasure in making the lives of those under his authority harder than they needed to be. He never greeted the residents. He never acknowledged their presence unless it was to issue a command or a criticism. He treated them, in the words of those who lived there, as if they were less than human. The man who served tea had experienced this coldness many times. But one incident stood out above all others. There was another resident in the facility, a quiet man who rarely received visitors. His family lived far away, and the journey to see him was difficult and expensive. One day, after many months, this man's wife managed to arrange a visit. She found transportation, made the long trip, and arrived at the facility ready to see her husband. But the chief officer had other plans. Knowing that the wife had arrived, the officer deliberately sent the husband to a distant part of the facility, a place where announcements could not be heard. When the wife checked in and the husband was called to the visiting area, he was too far away to hear his name. The calls were repeated. A search was conducted. But by the time he was found and brought back, visiting hours had ended. His wife had come all that way for nothing. The chief officer had done this on purpose. There was no reason for it, except spite, except the desire to cause pain to someone who could not fight back. When the man who served tea heard this story, his heart hardened against the chief officer. He already disliked the man, but now that dislike turned to something stronger. And it seemed to him that such a person was beyond redemption, beyond any possibility of change. It happened that a teacher visited this place of confinement from time to time, offering guidance and conversation to those who wished to receive it. The man who served tea attended these gatherings, and one day he spoke of his feelings toward the chief officer. He described the coldness, the daily humiliation of being treated as less than nothing. "This approach of kindness you teach," he said, "it might work in some places. But not here, not with someone like him. This is a hard place, and the only language such people understand is strength. If you show kindness, they see weakness. They take advantage." The teacher listened carefully. When the man had finished, the teacher was quiet for a moment. Then a gentle question came. "Would you be willing to try an experiment?" The man was suspicious. "What kind of experiment?" "You see this officer every day when you serve him tea. You have an opportunity that few others have. What if, instead of meeting his coldness with your own hardness, you tried something different? What if you offered him kindness?" The man almost laughed. "Kindness? To him? After what he has done?" "Not because he deserves it," the teacher said, "but because you deserve to be free of the anger you carry. And because sometimes kindness can reach places that nothing else can." The man shook his head. "It will not work. You do not understand what this place is like, what he is like." "Perhaps," said the teacher, "but you lose nothing by trying, and you might discover something unexpected." Against his better judgment, the man decided to try, not because he believed it would work, but because something in the teacher's words had touched him. Perhaps he was simply tired of carrying so much anger. Perhaps he wanted to prove the teacher wrong. Whatever the reason, he began. The next morning, when he prepared the chief officer's tea, he did so with unusual care. He made sure the water was the right temperature. He chose the cup he knew the officer preferred. He added exactly the amount of sugar the officer liked. And when he brought the tea to the officer's desk, he did not simply set it down and leave. He paused, met the officer's eyes, and said, "I hope you enjoy your tea, sir." The officer did not respond. He did not look up. He did not acknowledge in any way that the man existed. It was as if the words had been spoken to an empty room. The man returned to his duties, unsurprised. This was exactly what he had expected. The next day, he did the same thing. Careful preparation. Genuine effort to make the tea as good as it could be. A kind word as he set it down. And again, nothing. Not a glance. Not a grunt. Not the slightest indication that another human being was present. This continued for days, then weeks. Each morning, the man would bring tea prepared with care and offer a kind word. Each morning, he would receive nothing in return. It was like offering gifts to a statue. After a week, he returned to the teacher. "You see?" he said. "It does not work. I have tried every day and nothing has changed. He still treats me as if I do not exist." "A week is not very long," the teacher said gently. "The walls he has built took years to construct. They will not fall in 7 days. Then how long?" "I do not know. Perhaps they will never fall. But the question is not really about him, is it? The question is about who you want to be. Do you want to be someone who meets coldness with coldness? Or do you want to be someone who offers warmth, regardless of how it is received? The man had no answer to this. He returned to his work, and he continued the experiment. Weeks passed, then months. Every day, the same routine. Tea prepared with care, a kind word offered, and nothing in return. The man began to feel foolish. He imagined the other residents watching him, thinking he was weak or naive. He imagined the officer secretly laughing at his efforts. But something else was happening too. Something he had not expected. He noticed that the anger he had carried for so long was beginning to fade. Not completely, not all at once, but gradually. The daily practice of offering kindness, even unreturned kindness, was changing something in him. He was becoming softer, more patient, more at peace. He also began to see the officer differently. Not with approval, certainly. The pain of the past was not forgotten, but with something closer to curiosity. What had made this man so hard? What pain was he carrying that he needed to inflict pain on others? What would it be like to live inside such a cold heart? These questions did not excuse the officer's behavior, but they opened a small door of understanding that had been firmly closed before. And so the man continued, not because he expected results, but because the practice itself had become valuable to him. He had discovered that offering kindness, regardless of response, was its own reward. It was a morning like any other when the first change came. The man had prepared the tea with his usual care. He had found some biscuits that he knew the officer liked and arranged them neatly on a small plate. He brought everything to the officer's desk, set it down gently, and said, "Good morning, sir. I hope your day goes well." He expected nothing. He had learned to expect nothing. But this time, something different happened. The officer looked up. Not for long. Not with warmth. But he looked. And from his lips came a sound. A small sound, barely audible. Something between a grunt and a word. It was not much. To an outside observer, it might have seemed like nothing at all. But the man knew what it meant. For the first time, the officer had acknowledged that he existed. For the first time, there had been a response. The man felt something shift in his chest, a lightening, a hope he had not allowed himself to feel. He did not expect the progress to continue. One grunt did not mean transformation. The officer might return to stone the very next day. But something had cracked, however slightly. The wall was no longer quite as solid as it had been. The man continued his practice with renewed dedication. Some days, there was another grunt. Some days, nothing at all. Progress, when it came, was measured in the smallest of gestures. A brief glance. A slight nod. The tiniest relaxation of a rigid face. And then, one morning, it happened. The man had taken extra care that day. He had found a particular kind of tea he thought the officer might enjoy, something a little special, a little out of the ordinary. He had arranged everything beautifully. He brought it to the desk, set it down, and offered his customary kind words. The officer looked up. Their eyes met. And then, in a voice rusty from disuse but unmistakable, the officer spoke. "Thank you." 2 words. Just 2 small words. But they landed like a thunderclap. The man stood frozen for a moment, unsure he had heard correctly. In all his time at this institution, he had never heard this officer thank anyone for anything. It was unprecedented. It was, in its way, miraculous. Word spread quickly. In a place where news travels fast, this was the news of the day, the week, the month. The chief officer had said thank you to a resident, in front of others. Something that had seemed impossible had happened. What does this story teach us? It teaches us that patience matters. The man did not see results for a very long time. Most of us would have given up after a few days, a few weeks at most. But he continued, not knowing if his efforts would ever bear fruit. And eventually, they did. It teaches us that kindness changes us, even when it does not seem to change others. Long before the officer spoke those 2 words, the man who served tea had already been transformed. He had freed himself from the prison of his own anger. He had discovered a capacity for patience he did not know he possessed. The practice of kindness had made him a different person, regardless of the outcome. It teaches us that even the hardest hearts can soften. We never know what is happening beneath the surface of another person. The officer had seemed like stone, impenetrable, unchangeable. But somewhere inside, something was alive. Something was capable of responding to warmth. It simply needed more time, more persistence, more patience than most of us would think to offer. And it teaches us that our kindness matters, even when we cannot see the results. The man did not know, during all those months of offering and receiving nothing, that change was slowly occurring. He could not see the small shifts happening in the officer's heart. He had only the practice itself, the daily choice to offer warmth instead of coldness. And that was enough. That was everything. We must be honest here. This story had a beautiful outcome, but not all stories do. There are times when our kindness meets a wall that never cracks. There are people who are so deeply wounded, so firmly defended, that no amount of warmth can reach them. And there are situations where continuing to offer kindness would come at too great a cost to our own well-being. The teaching is not that kindness always works, if by works we mean changing the other person. The teaching is that kindness is always worth offering because of what it does in us, regardless of what it does in others. We cannot control how our kindness is received. We cannot guarantee that the walls will fall, that the hard heart will soften, that the cold person will warm. What we can control is who we choose to be. We can choose to be people who offer warmth, who plant seeds of goodness, who refuse to let the coldness of others freeze our own hearts. The Buddha taught that we are not responsible for the actions of others, only for our own actions. We cannot make someone else be kind. We can only be kind ourselves. We cannot force someone else's heart to open. We can only keep our own heart open. This is freedom. Not the freedom to control outcomes, but the freedom to choose our response. Not the power to change others, but the power to remain true to our own deepest values, regardless of how others behave. First, consider whether there is someone in your life who might benefit from patient, persistent kindness. Someone difficult, someone cold, someone who has built walls around their heart. You need not choose the most challenging person you know. Start, perhaps, with someone whose walls seem thin enough to possibly crack. Then, begin to offer small kindnesses. Not grand gestures, but simple, daily acts of warmth. A genuine greeting. A moment of attention. A small gift of care. Do not expect response. Do not keep score. Simply offer and let go. Notice what happens in you as you practice. Notice whether the anger or frustration you carry begins to lighten. Notice whether you begin to see this person differently, with more understanding, more compassion, more patience. And if change comes in the other person, receive it with gratitude, but do not cling to it. Tomorrow they may return to coldness. The path is long, and progress is rarely straight. What matters is not the destination but the walking. What matters is who you become along the way. Remember that you always have the right to protect yourself. If a relationship is harmful, if continuing to offer kindness would damage your well-being, it is wise to step back. Kindness toward others must not come at the cost of cruelty toward yourself. But where it is safe, where it is possible, where your heart is willing, consider walking this long path. You may be surprised by where it leads. You may discover that the person who is most transformed is not the difficult other, but yourself. Let us pause here and breathe. And when you are ready, we will continue walking together. We have walked together through stories of transformation, witnessing how patience and kindness can soften even the hardest of hearts. But there is another truth we must explore, one that touches the very root of why we sometimes become difficult ourselves. When we are exhausted, we are not at our best. When we are stretched thin and running on empty, patience becomes scarce, and kindness feels like a luxury we cannot afford. The person who snaps at a loved one, who loses their temper over small things, who seems unable to find warmth for those around them, is often simply a person who has been carrying too much for too long. The Buddha taught the middle way, a path that avoids the extremes of indulgence and deprivation. This teaching applies not only to our spiritual practice, but to how we live our daily lives. We cannot pour from an empty vessel. We cannot offer kindness to others when we have none left for ourselves. Learning to rest, to set down our burdens, is not selfishness. It is wisdom. Let us explore together the simple art of letting go. Imagine, for a moment, that you are holding a cup of water. It is not a large cup. It is not particularly heavy. If someone asked you how much it weighs, you might say a few ounces, perhaps half a pound. Nothing significant. Nothing that would trouble you. Now imagine holding that same cup with your arm extended in front of you. At first, it feels like nothing at all. The weight is barely noticeable. You could hold it for a minute without any difficulty. Perhaps 5 minutes. Perhaps even 10. But what if you held it for an hour? After an hour, that small cup would begin to feel much heavier. Your arm would ache. Your muscles would tremble. The weight that seemed like nothing would have become a genuine burden. And what if you held it for a day? For a week? For a year? The cup has not changed. It weighs exactly the same as it did in the first moment. But your experience of it has transformed entirely. What began as weightless has become unbearable. What seemed easy has become impossible. This is a teaching about more than cups. This is a teaching about everything we carry. We all carry burdens, responsibilities at work, obligations at home, worries about the future, regrets about the past, concerns for those we love, the endless small tasks that fill our days and occupy our minds. None of these burdens, taken alone, is necessarily crushing. A single worry is manageable. A single responsibility can be met. A single task can be completed. Like the cup of water, each individual weight seems light enough to bear. But we do not carry just one thing. We carry many things. And we carry them not for a moment but for hours, days, weeks, years. We hold our burdens extended in front of us, never setting them down, never giving our arms a chance to rest. Is it any wonder that we become exhausted? Is it any surprise that we grow irritable, impatient, unkind? We are not bad people when we snap at those we love. We are simply people who have been holding too much for too long. The Buddha observed that suffering often arises from clinging, from our refusal to let go of what we are holding. This teaching is usually applied to our attachment to pleasure, to possessions, to outcomes we desire. But it applies equally to how we hold our daily burdens. We cling to them. We refuse to set them down. And in our clinging, we create suffering for ourselves and for those around us. Here is a truth so simple that we often overlook it entirely. When the cup becomes heavy, set it down. Not forever. Not because the work does not matter. Not because the responsibilities will disappear. But for a few minutes. For a brief rest. For just long enough to let your arms recover their strength. This is not laziness. This is not avoiding your duties. This is wisdom. Because here is what happens when you set down the cup for 5 minutes and then pick it up again. It feels lighter. The cup has not changed. It weighs exactly what it weighed before. But you have changed. Your muscles have rested. Your strength has returned. What felt impossible now feels manageable again. The same is true of all the burdens we carry. When we allow ourselves to rest, when we set down our worries and responsibilities for even a short time, we return to them renewed. We work more efficiently. We think more clearly. We respond to challenges with greater patience and creativity. The time we take for rest is not time wasted. It is time invested. A few minutes of genuine rest can save hours of exhausted, inefficient struggle. A brief pause can prevent the mistakes and conflicts that arise when we are running on empty. There is an old saying that applies here. You cannot pour from an empty cup. To give to others, to meet our responsibilities, to show up fully for our lives, we must first make sure there is something within us to give. Rest fills the cup. Constant striving empties it. Let us look at how exhaustion spreads through our lives. Imagine someone who works very hard. They rise early, rush through their morning, and arrive at work already feeling hurried. Throughout the day, they push themselves relentlessly. There is always more to do, always another task demanding attention. They skip breaks. They eat lunch at their desk. They stay late to finish one more thing. By the time they arrive home, they are depleted. They have nothing left to give. Their family greets them, wanting connection, wanting presence, wanting love. But the well is dry. They snap at small irritations. They retreat into silence or distraction. They are physically present, but emotionally absent. And so the evening passes without nourishment, without true rest, without the warmth of genuine connection. They go to bed tired, sleep poorly, and wake the next morning already behind. Now the cycle accelerates. They arrive at work not only with the burdens of the day, but with the weight of a difficult evening and a restless night. They are less efficient, more prone to mistakes, more irritable with colleagues. The day feels harder than it needs to be. And when they return home that evening, they are even more depleted than before. The family, still wanting connection, still needing presence, meets someone with even less to give. The disappointment grows. The distance widens. This is how exhaustion spreads. Work stress creates home stress. Home stress creates work stress. Each feeds the other, and the cycle spirals downward until something breaks. The Buddha taught that to end suffering, we must understand its causes. The cause of this cycle is not too much work or too many responsibilities. The cause is that we have forgotten how to set down the cup. Breaking the cycle requires something that may seem counterintuitive. It requires doing less, at least for brief moments, so that we can ultimately do more. It requires stopping, even when everything in us tells us to keep going. It requires the wisdom to recognize that rest is not the enemy of productivity, but its essential foundation. Consider what happens when we build small pauses into our day. Perhaps 10 minutes in the morning before the rush begins, sitting quietly with a cup of tea, letting the mind settle before the demands arrive. Perhaps a few minutes in the middle of the day, stepping away from the desk, closing the eyes, allowing the accumulated tension to release. These pauses cost us time, but they return far more than they take. The mind that has rested, even briefly, works more efficiently. The heart that has been given space to breathe has more warmth to offer. The body that has been allowed to release its tension moves through the day with greater ease. And when we arrive home, something is different. There is something left to give. The well is not completely dry. We can meet our loved ones with presence, with patience, with the kindness they deserve and that we want to offer. This changes everything. The evening becomes nourishing rather than draining. Connection happens. Love flows. And when we wake the next morning, we are not starting from deficit. We are starting from wholeness. There is a story of a parent who attended meditation classes in their community. These classes were held one evening each week, and they required leaving work, traveling across town, and sitting quietly for an hour before returning home. For this parent, already stretched thin by the demands of work and family, the weekly class felt like a burden, another obligation, another thing taking time away from everything else that needed to be done. On many evenings, the temptation to skip the class was strong. I am too tired, this parent would think. I have too much to do. The family needs me at home. I cannot spare the time. One such evening, after a particularly exhausting day, the parent announced to their child that they would not be going to the meditation class that week. The child looked up with concern. "But you must go," the child said. "I am too tired, little one. I need to stay home tonight." "No," the child insisted. "You must go." "Why?" the parent asked, puzzled by the child's persistence. The child's answer was simple and devastating in its honesty. Because you are much nicer when you come back. In that moment, the parent understood something important. The time spent in meditation was not a luxury. It was not selfish. It was not taking away from the family. It was giving to the family. The rest, the stillness, the brief setting down of all burdens, these were not indulgences. They were necessities. And the family could see the difference, even when the parent could not. From that day forward, the parent rarely missed a class. Not because meditation had become easy or convenient, but because the child's words had revealed a truth that could not be unseen. The pause was not optional. It was essential. When we rest, we give a gift not only to ourselves, but to everyone around us. The colleague who works with a rested co-worker receives patience instead of irritability. The child who comes home to a rested parent receives presence instead of distraction. The partner who shares an evening with someone who has paused to breathe receives love instead of exhaustion. This is not obvious to us when we are caught in the cycle of constant doing. We think that by working harder, by never stopping, by sacrificing our rest, we are giving more to those who depend on us. We think that rest is selfish, that pausing is weakness, that setting down the cup means letting people down. The opposite is true. Our exhaustion is not a gift to anyone. Our depletion does not serve those we love. When we run ourselves empty, everyone suffers. There is a teaching attributed to the Buddha that speaks to this truth. He said that if we truly loved ourselves, we would never harm another, for we would understand that harming others harms ourselves. The reverse is also true. If we truly loved others, we would care for ourselves, for we would understand that our well-being is the foundation of all we have to offer. Rest is not separate from service. Rest is what makes service possible. Setting down the cup is not abandoning our responsibilities. It is ensuring that we can meet them with the presence and care they deserve. Consider the cup you are holding right now. Not a physical cup, but the weight of all you are carrying. The responsibilities, the responsibilities, the responsibilities, the responsibilities, the responsibilities, the worries, the endless tasks. How long have you been holding them? How heavy have they become? Now consider this. What would it feel like to set them down, even for a moment? You might fear that if you set them down, you will never pick them up again. You might worry that the world will fall apart without your constant holding. But the world is more resilient than you think, and you are more essential to it rested than exhausted. The Buddha taught that attachment causes suffering. We are attached not only to pleasant things but to our own busyness, our own sense of indispensability, our own identity as someone who never stops. Letting go of this attachment, even briefly, can feel very difficult. But it is also a small liberation. You do not have to change everything at once. You do not have to find hours of rest when you have only minutes. Simply begin where you are. Find one moment today when you can set down the cup. Take one breath that is not hurried. Allow yourself one pause that asks nothing of you except to be present. This is enough to begin. This is the seed from which a different life can grow. Let us pause here and practice what we have learned. Let your breath deepen, and when you are ready, gently, we will continue on together. we have explored the importance of rest, of setting down our burdens so that we might meet life and one another with greater patience and presence. But even when we are rested, even when our hearts are full, there come times when we must speak difficult truths. Times when someone we care about needs to hear something they may not want to hear. Times when silence would be a disservice to love. How do we speak such truths without causing unnecessary harm? How do we offer correction without closing hearts? How do we say what needs to be said in a way that can actually be received? The Buddha placed great emphasis on right speech, listing it as one of the essential elements of the path to liberation. He taught that our words should be true, but also that truth alone is not enough. Our words should also be kind. They should be timely. They should be spoken with a heart of goodwill. And they should be beneficial, offered not to harm but to help. This is a high standard. It asks us to consider not only what we say, but how and when and why we say it. It invites us to become craftspeople of communication, shaping our words with the same care a potter brings to clay. When someone criticizes us, what happens inside? For most of us, the first response is not openness but defense. We feel attacked. We feel misunderstood. We feel the need to explain ourselves, to justify our actions, to push back against what feels like an assault on who we are. This is natural. This is human. We have soft places within us, tender spots that flinch when touched too roughly. And criticism, even when it is accurate, even when it is offered with love, can feel like a finger pressing directly on a bruise. So we build walls. We stop listening. We prepare our counter-arguments before the other person has even finished speaking. We focus on finding flaws in their critique rather than truth we might learn from. The very feedback that could help us grow bounces off our defenses and falls to the ground, unheard and unused. This is a great loss. There is wisdom in how others see us. There are blind spots in our self-perception that only another's eyes can reveal. When we cannot receive feedback, we cut ourselves off from one of the most valuable sources of learning available to us. But the responsibility does not lie only with the receiver. The one who speaks also plays a role. The way we offer feedback can either invite openness or trigger defense. Our words can be keys that unlock hearts or hammers that cause them to slam shut. The Buddha offered guidance on when and how to speak difficult truths. He suggested that before speaking, we ask ourselves several questions. Is what I am about to say true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is this the right time? Will it be beneficial? If our words fail any of these tests, perhaps they should not be spoken, or not spoken yet, or not spoken in this way. But there is another layer to skillful speech, one that has to do with the texture and shape of our words. It is not enough to speak truth. We must wrap that truth in something that allows it to be received. We must create conditions where the listener can actually hear what we are saying, rather than simply defending against it. There is a simple technique that many wise teachers have discovered independently. It goes by different names in different traditions, but the essence is always the same. When you must offer difficult feedback, surround it with genuine appreciation. Begin with what is good. Speak first of what you value in this person, what they do well, what you admire and appreciate. Let them feel seen in their wholeness before you address the part that needs attention. Then, gently, offer the difficult truth. Say what needs to be said, clearly and kindly, without excessive softening that obscures your meaning, but also without harshness that triggers defense. And then return to appreciation. Close with more of what is good, more of what you value, more of what is working well. Let the last taste in their mouth be sweetness, not bitterness. This approach works because it addresses the fundamental fear that criticism awakens in us. When we receive negative feedback, our deepest worry is often not about the specific issue being raised. Our deepest worry is that we are not acceptable, that we are flawed in some fundamental way, that we are not loved. When someone begins with criticism, this fear is activated immediately. We feel attacked at the core of who we are. And from that place of fear, we cannot learn. We can only defend. But when someone begins with genuine appreciation, something different happens. We feel seen. We feel valued. We feel that our worth is not in question. From this place of safety, we can afford to hear about areas where we might improve. The criticism no longer feels like an attack on our being. It feels like useful information about our doing. The appreciation at the end serves a similar purpose. It reminds us that the relationship is intact. It assures us that one area of difficulty does not define the whole of how we are seen. It sends us away feeling strengthened rather than diminished. This is not manipulation. It is not trickery. It is simply wisdom about how human hearts work. We open to those who make us feel safe. We close to those who make us feel threatened. If we want our words to reach another person, we must first create the conditions where reaching is possible. There is a caution here that must be spoken. This approach only works when the appreciation is genuine. If we offer hollow praise simply as a technique, simply as a way to slip our criticism past someone's defenses, people will sense it. They will feel manipulated rather than cared for. The trust between us will erode rather than strengthen. So before offering difficult feedback, we must do the inner work of finding what is truly good in this person. We must reconnect with why we value them, what we appreciate about them, what gifts they bring. This is not always easy, especially if we are frustrated or hurt. But it is essential. The Buddha taught that all beings have Buddha nature, the seed of awakening within them. Even when someone's behavior troubles us, even when we need to address a real problem, there is goodness in them that we can recognize and name. Our task is to find it, to see it clearly, and to speak it honestly before we speak anything else. This inner work transforms the entire conversation. We are no longer an adversary delivering criticism. We become an ally offering support. We are not tearing down but building up, not attacking but nurturing. The difficult feedback becomes one element in a larger context of care. This teaching applies not only to how we speak but to how we listen. When someone offers us criticism, we might remember that they too are human, struggling to communicate something difficult. They may not have the skill to wrap their words in appreciation. They may deliver truth bluntly, clumsily, in ways that trigger our defenses. But if we can pause before reacting, if we can take a breath and remember that feedback is a gift, even poorly wrapped feedback, we may find something valuable beneath the rough packaging. The Zen tradition speaks of using everything as a teacher. Every experience, even the uncomfortable ones, offers something we can learn from. This includes the experience of being criticized. Rather than focusing on how the feedback was delivered, we can ask ourselves whether there is any truth in it we might grow from. This does not mean accepting abuse or allowing ourselves to be treated poorly. We can set boundaries around how people speak to us while still remaining open to the content of what they say. We can say, "I want to hear your feedback, and I would receive it better if you could share it more gently." But even when such conversations are not possible, even when criticism comes roughly and without care, we can choose our inner response. We can choose to look for the gift hidden in the difficult wrapping. We can choose to grow rather than simply defend. There is a story told of a teacher who was once harshly criticized by a visitor to the community. The visitor spoke at length about everything the teacher was doing wrong, every fault in their character, every failure in their leadership. The students who witnessed this exchange were upset on their teacher's behalf. They expected the teacher to respond with defensiveness, or perhaps with a sharp correction of the visitor's rudeness. Instead, the teacher listened quietly until the visitor had finished. Then, after a moment of silence, the teacher bowed slightly and said, "Thank you. I will reflect on what you have shared." Later, a student asked the teacher how they could respond so calmly to such an attack. The teacher smiled gently. "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The student thought for a moment. "It remains with the one who offered it." "Just so," said the teacher. "When someone offers harsh words, I can choose whether or not to accept them. If there is truth in them, I will take that truth and learn from it. The rest I leave with the one who offered it. It does not belong to me." This teaching points to a profound freedom. We are not obligated to accept everything that is thrown at us. We can receive what is useful and release what is not. We can learn from criticism without being destroyed by it. We can remain open without being defenseless. When you find yourself needing to offer difficult feedback to someone you care about, pause before speaking. Take time to reconnect with what you genuinely value in this person. Let your heart fill with appreciation before any correction flows from your lips. Then, when you speak, begin with this appreciation. Let the other person know that they are seen, valued, respected. Create safety before asking them to be vulnerable. Offer your feedback clearly and kindly. Say what needs to be said, without harshness, but also without so much softening that your meaning becomes unclear. Trust that they can hear difficult things when they feel safe enough to listen. And close with appreciation once more. Remind them of the larger context of your regard for them. Let them know that one area of difficulty does not diminish the whole of who they are in your eyes. This approach takes more time than simply blurting out what is wrong. It requires more intention, more care, more awareness. But the results are worth the effort. Words delivered this way actually land. They are received rather than rejected. They lead to growth rather than defensiveness. And in offering feedback this way, we ourselves are transformed. We become more aware of the goodness in others. We practice seeing wholeness rather than focusing only on problems. We learn to speak truth wrapped in love, which is the most powerful form of truth there is. The Buddha taught that words have great power. They can cause suffering or relieve it. They can wound or heal. They can divide or connect. Each time we speak, we are choosing what kind of power to release into the world. Rest now in the silence between words. Breathe gently. Let these teachings settle wherever they are needed. And when you are ready, we will continue on together. We have journeyed together through many teachings. We have learned to welcome difficulty rather than fight it. We have seen how patience and kindness can transform even the most challenging relationships. We have explored the wisdom of rest and the art of speaking truth with care. But there is one relationship we have not yet fully addressed. One person whose difficulty affects us more than any other. One companion from whom we can never escape, no matter how far we travel or how completely we change our circumstances. That person is ourselves. The Buddha taught that we should be our own refuge, our own island in the midst of the flood. But how can we take refuge in someone we have not made peace with? How can we find shelter in a relationship marked by criticism, disappointment, and endless demands for improvement? Now we turn inward. We explore the most important friendship we will ever have, and we discover that the peace we have been seeking in the outer world has been waiting for us all along in the quiet depths of our own hearts. If someone asked you to name the most difficult person in your life, who would come to mind? Perhaps you would think of a challenging colleague, someone whose behavior tests your patience day after day. Perhaps you would think of a family member whose choices you cannot understand, whose words sometimes wound you. Perhaps you would think of someone from your past who caused you pain, whose shadow still falls across your present. All of these are valid answers. All of these relationships carry their own weight and complexity. But there is another answer worth considering. The most difficult person in your life may be you. This is not obvious at first. We are so accustomed to looking outward for the source of our troubles that we rarely turn the gaze upon ourselves. When we are frustrated, we look for what is frustrating us. When we are unhappy, we search for what is making us unhappy. The difficult colleague, the disappointing circumstances, the world that refuses to arrange itself according to our wishes. But consider how you speak to yourself. Consider the voice that runs in your mind, commenting on everything you do. Is it a kind voice? Is it patient and encouraging? Or is it harsh, critical, never satisfied, always pointing out what is wrong and what could be better? For many of us, the inner voice is far crueler than anything we would tolerate from another person. We say things to ourselves that we would never say to a friend. We hold ourselves to standards we would never impose on someone we loved. We notice every flaw, remember every failure, and somehow manage to overlook or minimize every success. If we treated a friend the way we treat ourselves, we would not have that friend for long. Here is what makes this relationship so significant. You can walk away from a difficult colleague. You can limit contact with a challenging family member. You can move to a new city, start a new job, surround yourself with entirely new people. But you cannot walk away from yourself. Wherever you go, there you are. In the morning when you wake, you are there. Throughout the day, as you move through your activities, you are there. In the quiet of the night, when sleep will not come, you are there. There is no vacation from yourself, no retreat, no moment of escape. This means that your relationship with yourself colors every other experience you have. If you are at war with yourself, you carry that war into every room you enter. If you are constantly criticizing yourself, that critical energy leaks out into how you see others. If you cannot find peace in your own company, you will search for it endlessly in external circumstances that can never provide it. The reverse is also true. If you are at peace with yourself, that peace becomes a foundation for everything else. If you can offer yourself kindness, that kindness overflows naturally toward others. If you have found a friend in yourself, you are never truly alone, no matter how solitary your circumstances may be. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." This is not selfishness. This is the foundation upon which all other love is built. There is a story of a monk who lived for many years in a small dwelling, far from the bustle of towns and cities. He had few possessions and fewer visitors. His days were spent in meditation, in simple tasks, in the quiet observation of nature. By most measures, his life was solitary. People who learned of his circumstances would sometimes ask him about loneliness. "Do you not miss having others around? Do you not long for conversation, for company, for the warmth of human connection? How can you bear to be so alone?" The monk would smile at these questions. "I am never lonely," he would say. "There is always someone with me." The questioners would look around, puzzled. The dwelling was clearly empty. No one else was there. "Who is with you?" they would ask. "Myself," the monk would reply. "I am always in the company of myself, and I have found that I am rather good company once I got to know me." This was not a joke, though it often made people laugh. It was a profound truth, earned through years of inner work. The monk had made peace with himself. He had learned to be a friend to himself. And in that friendship, he had found a companionship that no external circumstance could provide or take away. "You see," he explained, "loneliness is not about being alone. It is about being with someone you do not like." Many people feel lonely in crowded rooms, surrounded by others, because they have not yet learned to enjoy their own company. And some people feel perfectly content in solitude, because wherever they go, they are with a dear friend. Why do so many of us find ourselves difficult to live with? What creates this inner war that disturbs our peace and spills out into our relationships with others? Often, it begins with the belief that we should be other than we are. We carry images of who we think we should be, the better version of ourselves that would finally be acceptable, the improved model that would finally deserve love. We compare our actual selves to these imagined ideals, and we find ourselves wanting, always wanting. We should be more patient. We should be more successful. We should be further along than we are. We should have figured this out by now. We should not still be struggling with the same old patterns that have dogged us for years. This word, should, is a small word that carries enormous weight. Every should is a rejection of what is. Every should is a statement that reality is not acceptable, that we are not acceptable, that something fundamental must change before we can be at peace. But here is a liberating truth, one that the Buddha pointed toward again and again. You are already whole. You are already complete. You are already enough. Not the future you who has solved all your problems. Not the imagined you who has overcome all your flaws. The you that exists right now, in this moment, with all your imperfections and struggles and unfinished edges. This does not mean there is no room for growth. It does not mean we should abandon all aspiration. But it means that growth happens best from a foundation of acceptance, not rejection. We can work to become more skillful, more kind, more wise, without first requiring ourselves to be unacceptable as we are. How do we become friends with ourselves? We begin by noticing. Simply noticing, without trying to change anything, how we habitually treat ourselves. What do we say to ourselves when we make a mistake? What tone do we use? What words? If we could hear these inner conversations played back to us, how would they sound? This noticing, done with gentleness rather than judgment, is itself a radical act. Most of us have never really listened to the inner voice. It runs constantly in the background, shaping our experience, and we take it for granted like the hum of an appliance. Bringing it into awareness is the first step toward change. Then we can begin to question. Is this voice telling the truth? Are we really as flawed as it claims? And even if there is some truth in its criticisms, is this harsh tone the most effective way to inspire growth? Would we speak this way to someone we loved? Would it help them to hear these words? Usually, the answer is no. Harshness does not inspire growth. It inspires shame, withdrawal, defensiveness. The inner critic, despite its apparent intention to help us improve, often keeps us stuck. We become so busy defending against its attacks that we have no energy left for actual change. What would help is kindness. The same kindness we have been learning to offer difficult people, we must learn to offer ourselves. When we stumble, a gentle word. When we fail, understanding rather than condemnation. When we notice our flaws, compassion for the human being who is doing their best in a complicated world. The Buddha taught loving kindness meditation, in which we deliberately cultivate feelings of warmth and goodwill. Traditionally, this practice begins with ourselves. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. These are not selfish wishes. They are the foundation upon which all other love is built. There is another teaching that emerges from this exploration. When we have not made peace with ourselves, we see our inner conflicts reflected everywhere we look. Have you ever noticed that the qualities that bother us most in others are often qualities we struggle with in ourselves? The person whose self-centeredness irritates us may be showing us something about our own self-centeredness that we have not fully accepted. The person whose anxiety annoys us may be mirroring an anxiety we have not made peace with in our own heart. This is not always true. Sometimes people genuinely have qualities that are harmful and need to be addressed. But it is worth asking, when we feel strongly reactive to someone else's behavior, whether part of that reaction might be recognition, whether we might be seeing, in them, something we have rejected in ourselves. The ancient teachers called this projection. We project onto others the parts of ourselves we cannot accept. And then we fight those parts, out there in the world, rather than making peace with them, in here, in our own hearts. When we heal the inner relationship, something remarkable happens. The outer world becomes less difficult, not because people have changed, but because we have changed. The things that once triggered us lose their charge. The behaviors that once seemed intolerable become merely human. We recognize our shared struggles, our shared imperfections, and we find we have more patience for others because we have more patience for ourselves. This is why the inner work matters so much. It is not self-indulgence. It is the foundation of peace with all beings. There is an insight that comes to those who persist in this inner work. It is simple, but its simplicity contains a revolution. The insight is this: I am okay. Not perfect. Not finished. not without room for growth, but fundamentally, essentially, at the core, okay, acceptable, worthy of love, not because of what we have achieved or become, but simply because we are. This insight cannot be given by another person. We can be told 1,000 times that we are okay, and it will not penetrate the armor of our self-rejection. The insight must arise from within, from our own direct seeing, from a moment when the clouds part and we glimpse the simple truth of our own worthiness. The Buddha taught that all beings have Buddha nature, the seed of awakening within them. This includes you. Whatever you have done, whatever you have failed to do, whatever flaws you carry and struggles you face, the seed of awakening is within you. You are not separate from the goodness that pervades all things. You are an expression of it, however imperfect, however incomplete. When this insight lands, when it moves from concept to lived experience, everything changes. The war ends. The critic falls silent, or at least grows quieter. And in the space that opens, something new becomes possible. Peace, rest, the simple enjoyment of being alive in this body, with this mind, exactly as we are. We return now to the monk in his quiet dwelling, content in his own company, never lonely despite his solitude. His secret was not that he had perfected himself. He still had flaws. He still made mistakes. He still had days when his mind was restless and his heart was heavy. He was not a finished product, polished and complete. His secret was that he had stopped requiring himself to be perfect before he could be accepted. He had stopped waiting for some future self to arrive before he could be at peace. He had made friends with the self that actually existed in all its imperfection, and in that friendship, he had found everything he needed. This is available to all of us, not through some special achievement or spiritual attainment, but through a simple shift in how we relate to ourselves. The friend we have been seeking has been here all along. The peace we have been chasing has been waiting in our own hearts. We need only stop running and turn to face what has always been with us. You are your own constant companion. You might as well be a kind one. You might as well be a friend. In the days ahead, notice how you speak to yourself. Notice the tone, the words, the feeling behind the inner voice. And when you catch yourself being harsh, pause. Take a breath and ask, is this how I would speak to someone I loved? If not, you might try a different approach. Offer yourself the same understanding you would offer a dear friend who was struggling. Speak to yourself with patience, with kindness, with the recognition that you are doing your best in a world that is not always easy. When you make a mistake, instead of condemnation, try curiosity. What can I learn from this? What was I needing that I tried to meet in an unskillful way? How might I do it differently next time? And in the quiet moments, try offering yourself the words of loving kindness. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. May I live with ease. These are not magic words. They will not instantly transform your relationship with yourself. But spoken regularly, with sincerity, they begin to soften the heart. They begin to build the friendship that will sustain you through all of life's difficulties. You deserve this kindness. Not because you have earned it, not because you are perfect, but simply because you are. Simply because you are a living being, doing your best, worthy of love, like every other being in this vast and mysterious universe. Rest now in your own presence. Breathe gently, and when you are ready, we will continue on together toward the final teaching. We have discovered the importance of befriending ourselves, of making peace with the one companion from whom we can never escape. This inner friendship creates a foundation of stability that supports us through all of life's challenges. But challenges will still come. No matter how much inner work we do, no matter how deep our peace becomes, life will continue to throw difficulties in our path. People will criticize us. Circumstances will disappoint us. Plans will fall apart. The ground we thought was solid will sometimes shift beneath our feet. The question is not whether difficulty will come. The question is what we will do with it when it arrives. Now, we explore a radical possibility. What if the very things that seem to bury us could become the ground on which we rise? What if every burden, every criticism, every hardship contained within it the seeds of our elevation? This is not wishful thinking. This is ancient wisdom, tested across countless generations, available to anyone willing to see their struggles in a new light. When difficulty arrives, our first response is usually resistance. We do not want this. We did not ask for this. We wish it would go away and leave us in peace. This resistance is natural. It arises from the deep human desire for comfort, for safety, for a life free from pain. There is nothing wrong with this desire. It is woven into our very being, a survival instinct that has served our species for countless generations. But resistance, while natural, is not always helpful. When we push against what has already arrived, we often exhaust ourselves without changing anything. The difficulty remains, and now we are depleted as well. We have added the suffering of struggle to the pain of the original problem. The Buddha observed this pattern with great clarity. He taught that pain is inevitable, but suffering is created by our relationship to pain. When we resist what is, when we insist that reality should be different than it is, we multiply our distress. The first arrow of difficulty is joined by a second arrow of our own making. But there is another way. We can learn to receive what comes, not with passive resignation, but with active wisdom. We can ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What can I do with this?" We can transform from victims of circumstance into craftspeople of our own lives, using whatever materials arrive as the raw substance of our growth. Let us explore a story that has been told in many forms across many cultures. It is a simple tale, but within its simplicity lies a teaching of great power. Once, in a rural land of farms and fields, there lived a donkey. This donkey spent its days wandering the countryside, grazing on grass, enjoying the simple pleasures of its simple life. It was not a remarkable donkey. It had no special talents or unusual qualities. It was simply an ordinary creature, living an ordinary existence. One day, as the donkey walked along a familiar path, it failed to notice a danger ahead. An old well, long abandoned and partially hidden by overgrown grass, lay directly in its path. Before the donkey could react, the ground gave way beneath its hooves, and it tumbled down into the darkness. The fall was frightening, but the donkey survived. The well was dry, so there was no danger of drowning. And while the landing was hard, no bones were broken. The donkey stood in the dim light at the bottom of the well, shaken but alive. But survival was only the beginning of its problems. The walls of the well were smooth and steep. There was no way to climb out. The donkey was trapped. It began to call for help. The sound of a donkey in distress is not a pleasant sound, but it is a loud one. The donkey cried out again and again, hoping that someone would hear, that someone would come to rescue it from this dark prison. Eventually, someone did hear. A farmer who owned the land came to investigate the noise. But by the time he arrived, the donkey had grown quiet, exhausted from calling out for so long. The farmer peered down into the shadowy well, but in the dim light, he could not see clearly to the bottom. The farmer had long worried about this old well. It was dangerous, he thought. Someone might fall in. A child from a neighboring farm, perhaps. It should be filled in. And so, not realizing that a living creature waited below, the farmer began to shovel dirt into the well. He meant no harm. He was simply trying to make his land safer. But scoop after scoop of earth fell down into the darkness, landing on the donkey's back, dusting its fur, piling up around its legs. The donkey was frightened. First the fall, then the long hours of waiting, and now this. Dirt raining down from above, slowly filling the space around it. The donkey called out again, but the farmer was old, his hearing not what it once was. He continued his work, unaware of what was happening below. For a while, the donkey did not know what to do. The dirt kept coming, piling up around its legs. The situation seemed hopeless. There was no way to climb the smooth walls. And now even the space at the bottom was slowly filling. But then something shifted. In the midst of its fear, a different kind of awareness arose. The donkey noticed something. Each time a shovel of dirt landed on its back, it had a choice. It could let the dirt pile up, weighing it down. Or it could do something else. It could shake the dirt off. The donkey tried it. When the next shovel of dirt landed, it shook its body, and the dirt fell to the ground. Just a small shake, but the dirt was gone from its back. And then the donkey noticed something else. The dirt that had fallen was now beneath its hooves. It was standing a little higher than before. A kind of understanding dawned. Each shovel of dirt that fell from above could become something else entirely. If the donkey shook it off, the dirt would fall beneath it. And if the donkey then stepped up onto that dirt, it would rise a little higher in the well. Shake it off. Step up. Shake it off. Step up. The donkey began to practice this, again and again. Each time dirt fell, the donkey shook it off and stepped up. What had seemed like a hopeless situation was slowly becoming the means of escape. The farmer, meanwhile, continued his work without looking down. The well was deep, and he assumed it would take many loads of earth to fill. He shoveled steadily, thinking only of making the land safe. He did not notice when a pair of ears appeared at the top of the well. He did not notice when a head followed, then a neck, then shoulders. He did not notice until the donkey, having risen all the way from the bottom of the well on a platform of fallen earth, stepped calmly out onto solid ground. The farmer dropped his shovel in astonishment. The donkey stood before him, covered in dust, but very much alive. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then the farmer began to laugh, a gentle laugh of wonder and relief. He had not known. He had not meant any harm. And somehow, against all odds, the creature had found its way out. He brought the donkey water and brushed the dust from its coat. And when the donkey eventually wandered off, continuing on its way, the farmer watched it go with a newfound respect for the quiet wisdom that can arise in the most unlikely of beings. This story carries a teaching that applies far beyond the situation of a donkey in a well. Throughout our lives, people will throw dirt on us. We have a choice in how we respond. We can let the dirt pile up. We can accept each criticism as proof of our worthlessness. We can allow each dismissal to push us down further, each cruelty to bury us more deeply. If we respond this way, the people who throw dirt at us will achieve their aim. We will be buried. Or we can do what the donkey did. We can shake it off and step up. Every criticism contains information. Sometimes the information is about us, something we might learn from. Sometimes the information is about the person doing the criticizing, their own pain or insecurity or need to diminish others. Either way, we can shake off the weight of the attack and use what we have learned to rise a little higher. Every hardship builds strength. The muscles of resilience are developed not in easy times but in difficult ones. Each challenge we face and survive leaves us more capable of facing the next one. We step up onto our difficulties and find ourselves standing taller than before. Every apparent setback can become a setup for growth. The job we did not get opens a door we never would have noticed. The relationship that ended frees us to become someone we could not have become within it. The plan that fell apart makes room for something better to emerge. There is a teaching in the Taoist tradition about the power of yielding. Water is soft and yielding, yet it wears away the hardest stone. The reed that bends in the wind survives the storm that breaks the mighty oak. The donkey in our story embodied this wisdom. It did not fight the dirt. It did not try to throw it back at the farmer. It did not waste its energy on resistance or revenge. It simply used what was given, transformed the attack into advantage, turned burial into elevation. The Buddha taught something similar when he spoke of using everything as fuel for awakening. Our greed, our anger, our confusion, these are not simply obstacles to be eliminated. They are energy that can be transformed. They are raw material for our growth. When we learn to work with what arises rather than against it, we discover resources we never knew we had. This does not mean we should seek out difficulty or welcome cruelty. The donkey did not jump into the well on purpose. It did not enjoy having dirt thrown on it. Given the choice, it surely would have preferred a peaceful day of grazing to a near-death experience in an abandoned well. But when difficulty comes, as it will, we can meet it with wisdom rather than despair. We can remember the donkey. Shake it off. Step up. There is another aspect of this teaching worth considering. Each step up was small. Each shake of the body removed only one shovel's worth of dirt. Taken alone, any single action seemed insignificant. But the actions accumulated. Step by small step, the donkey rose. What seemed like nothing became something. What seemed like nowhere became the top of the well. So it is with our own growth. Each difficulty we transform, each criticism we learn from, each hardship we use as fuel, these are small things in the moment. We do not leap to enlightenment in a single bound. We do not transcend all suffering with one insight. But the small things add up. The height accumulates. Over time, we find that we have risen far above where we started. Problems that once would have devastated us now barely disturb our peace. Criticisms that once would have buried us now slide off like water. This is the patient work of a lifetime. There is no shortcut. But there is also no limit to how high we can rise if we simply keep shaking off and stepping up. Consider the difficulties you face in your own life. The criticisms that have wounded you. The hardships that have weighed you down. The moments when it seemed like life itself was trying to bury you. What would it mean to shake these off? Not to pretend they did not happen. Not to deny the pain they caused. But to refuse to let them be the final word. To take whatever truth or learning they contain and to release the rest. What would it mean to step up? To use these very difficulties as the ground on which you stand? To find that each challenge, once integrated, has left you standing just a little taller than before? The Buddha taught that life is characterized by impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, neither pleasure nor pain. The dirt being thrown on you now will not be thrown forever. The well you find yourself in is not your permanent home. But more than this, the Buddha taught that we have agency. We are not merely victims of circumstance, passively receiving whatever life throws at us. We can choose how we respond. We can choose what we do with what we are given. We can choose, in every moment, whether to be buried or to rise. In the days and weeks ahead, when difficulty comes, remember the donkey. When someone criticizes you unfairly, shake it off and step up. Ask yourself what, if anything, you can learn from the criticism. Take that learning and release the rest. Stand a little taller for having survived. When circumstances turn against you, shake it off and step up. Ask yourself how this apparent setback might become a setup for something new. Look for the door that opens when another door closes. Trust that height can be built from any material, even the dirt of disappointment. When life throws so much at you that you feel you might be buried, remember the donkey's patience. Remember that each small shake, each small step, accumulates into something larger. Remember that you have survived every difficulty you have ever faced, and you are still here, still standing, still capable of rising. The well is not your home. The dirt is not your destiny. You are a creature capable of transformation, capable of using whatever comes as fuel for your growth, capable of rising from the deepest darkness into the light. Rest now in this knowing. Whatever you have faced, whatever you face still, you have within you the capacity to rise. For now, simply rest. And when you are ready, we will continue on together. We have learned to rise from the wells we fall into, to transform the dirt that is thrown upon us into the ground on which we stand. This is powerful wisdom, and it serves us well when difficulty comes. But there is another teaching that complements this strength, one that is softer, gentler, more yielding. It is the wisdom of flowing with life rather than always striving against it. The wisdom of acceptance, the wisdom of ease. Sometimes the greatest peace comes not from overcoming our circumstances, but from releasing our struggle with them entirely. Not from climbing higher, but from resting where we are. Not from transforming what happens to us, but from transforming how we hold it. Now, we explore the gentle art of letting life be as it is. We discover that sometimes the deepest wisdom looks like simplicity, and the greatest strength looks like surrender. Imagine a river flowing through a landscape. The water moves steadily, continuously, following the contours of the land. When it meets a rock, it does not stop to argue. It does not demand that the rock move out of its way. It does not exhaust itself, pushing against the obstacle. Instead, the water simply flows around the rock. It finds another path, adapts to what is there, continues on its journey. The rock remains, but the water is not troubled. It accepts the rock as part of the landscape and keeps moving. There is profound wisdom in this image. How much of our suffering comes from arguing with rocks? How much energy do we spend insisting that life should be other than it is, that obstacles should not exist, that the landscape should rearrange itself according to our preferences? The Tao Te Ching, that ancient book of wisdom, speaks often of water. It says that nothing in the world is softer or weaker than water, yet nothing is better at overcoming the hard and strong. This is because water does not compete. It does not fight. It simply flows. We too can learn to flow, not by becoming passive or indifferent, but by releasing our tight grip on how things should be, by accepting what is, even as we work gently toward what might be, by trusting that the river knows its way to the sea, even when we cannot see the path from where we stand. There is a story that has been told in many lands, in many versions. It concerns a farmer, a horse, and the mysterious nature of fortune. Once there lived an old farmer who had worked his fields for many years. He lived a simple life with his son, and they had one horse that helped them with the heavy work of the farm. One day, the horse ran away. It escaped through a gap in the fence and disappeared into the hills. The farmer's neighbors came to offer their sympathy. "What terrible luck," they said. "Your only horse gone. How will you manage? This is such a misfortune." The old farmer listened calmly. When they finished, he simply said, "Perhaps. We shall see." A few days later, the horse returned. And it did not return alone. It brought with it 2 wild horses from the hills, beautiful, strong creatures that had followed it home. The neighbors came again, this time to celebrate. "What wonderful luck," they exclaimed. "Now you have 3 horses instead of 1. You are truly blessed. What a fortune." The old farmer nodded quietly. "Perhaps," he said. "We shall see." The following week, the farmer's son was trying to train one of the wild horses. The horse threw him, and the young man broke his leg badly. He would be unable to work for many months. The neighbors returned with long faces. "What terrible luck," they said. "Your son, injured. And just before the busy season. How will you harvest your crops? This is a disaster." The old farmer tended to his son with gentle care. To the neighbors, he said only, "Perhaps. We shall see." A month later, the army came through the village. War had broken out, and they were taking all the young men to fight. It was dangerous duty, and many would not return. But when they came to the old farmer's house and saw the son with his broken leg, they passed him by. He could not march, could not fight, could not serve. He was left behind. The neighbors gathered once more. "What wonderful luck," they began to say. But by now, Some of them were beginning to understand. They looked at the old farmer, waiting. He smiled gently. "Perhaps," he said, "we shall see." This story points to something important about the nature of our judgments. We are so quick to label events as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, lucky or unlucky. We are so certain that we know what is best for us, what will lead to happiness, what will cause suffering. But do we really know? The farmer in the story was not indifferent to what happened. He cared for his horse when it returned. He tended to his son when he was injured. He felt relief when the army passed by. He was fully human, fully engaged with life. But he held his judgments lightly. He knew that he could not see the whole picture. He knew that what looked like misfortune might contain hidden blessings, and what looked like blessing might bring unforeseen difficulties. He knew that life is more complex and mysterious than our simple categories of good and bad can capture. The Buddha taught that much of our suffering comes from attachment, not only to things and people, but to our ideas about how life should unfold. We create stories about what we need to be happy. We build expectations about how events should proceed. And when reality fails to match our stories, we suffer. But what if we held our stories more loosely? What if we admitted that we do not know, cannot know, what is truly best? What if we met each moment with the farmer's gentle wisdom? Perhaps we shall see. This is not passivity. It is not resignation. It is a kind of freedom. Freedom from the exhausting work of constantly judging, constantly measuring life against our expectations, constantly being disappointed when reality refuses to cooperate with our plans. We live in a world that values certainty. We are taught to make plans, set goals, know where we are going. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable, even frightening. We want to know what will happen, how things will turn out, whether we will be okay. But certainty is largely an illusion. We do not know what tomorrow will bring. We cannot predict how our choices will unfold over years and decades. The future is hidden from us, no matter how carefully we plan or how confidently we predict. The wise ones throughout history have recognized this. Rather than fighting against uncertainty, they have learned to embrace it. They have discovered that there is peace in not knowing. There is rest in releasing the need to control what cannot be controlled. There is a teaching in the Zen tradition called beginner's mind. It refers to approaching each moment with openness and curiosity, without the burden of assumptions about how things should be. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. When we admit that we do not know what is best, something relaxes within us. We stop exhausting ourselves trying to figure everything out. We stop tensing against the uncertainty of life. We begin to trust that things will unfold as they unfold, and that we will meet each moment as it comes. This trust is not naive. It does not ignore real dangers or real difficulties, but it recognizes that worry does not protect us from the future. It only steals our peace in the present. Acceptance is perhaps the most misunderstood of all spiritual teachings. When we hear the word, we often think it means giving up, resigning ourselves to things we do not like, becoming passive in the face of injustice or suffering. But true acceptance is something quite different. It is the recognition of what is. It is the willingness to start from where we actually are, rather than from where we wish we were. It is the foundation from which all wise action flows. Consider the difference between these two responses to difficulty. In the first, we spend our energy resisting what has already happened. We argue with reality, insist that things should be different, exhaust ourselves in struggle against the unchangeable past. By the time we turn to address the actual situation, we are depleted and frustrated. In the second response, we accept what has happened. Not with joy, necessarily. Not with approval, but with clear-eyed acknowledgement that this is what is. From this place of acceptance, we can see more clearly what might be done. Our energy is available for action rather than consumed by resistance. The Buddha spoke of this when he taught about the nature of suffering. He did not say that we should never feel pain or that we should pretend difficulties do not exist. He said that suffering arises when we cling, when we resist, when we insist that impermanent things should be permanent and that uncontrollable things should be within our control. Acceptance releases this clinging. It lets go of the argument with reality. And in that letting go, we find a peace that no circumstance can disturb. When we stop fighting life, something unexpected happens. We become lighter. The heaviness we carry is often not the weight of our actual circumstances, but the weight of our resistance to them. We drag behind us the burden of how things should have been. We carry on our shoulders the load of how things must become. We stagger under the pressure of our own expectations. But when we accept what is, these burdens fall away. We are left with only this moment, this breath, this simple experience of being alive. And this, it turns out, is not so heavy after all. There is a great freedom in this lightness. We can laugh at our own mistakes instead of being crushed by them. We can meet difficulties with curiosity instead of dread. We can hold our preferences lightly, enjoying when things go our way and adapting when they do not. This does not mean we stop caring. The farmer in our story cared deeply for his son, his horse, his land. But his caring was not rigid. It did not depend on things going a certain way. It could flex and flow with circumstances, like water finding its path around stones. The great teachers often had this quality of lightness about them. They could laugh easily. They were not burdened by self-importance. They met each situation fresh, without the heavy weight of how things were supposed to be. This lightness is available to all of us. It is our natural state, hidden beneath the accumulated weight of our resistance and our expectations. When we let go, even a little, we begin to feel it again. The simple joy of being. The ease of flowing with life rather than against it. All of our worry about the future, all of our regret about the past, all of our resistance to the present, these take us away from the only moment that actually exists, this one. The past is memory. The future is imagination. Only the present is real. And when we bring our full attention here, to this moment, something remarkable happens. Most of our problems disappear. Not forever. Not completely. The challenges of life will still need to be met when their time comes. But right now, in this breath, in this instant, there is usually nothing terribly wrong. There is just this body, this breath, this awareness. There is just life, happening. The Buddha encouraged his followers to find refuge in the present moment. Not because the present is always pleasant, but because it is always manageable. We can handle this moment. It is only when we pile up all our imagined future moments, all our remembered past moments, that the weight becomes unbearable. One moment at a time, life is gentle. One breath at a time, we can find peace. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when the circumstances are hard, there is always this moment. And this moment can be met with presence, with acceptance, with grace. We have covered much ground together in these teachings. We have explored kindness and patience, rest and communication, self-acceptance and transformation. These are valuable tools for a life well lived. But beneath all the tools and techniques, there is something simpler. It is the wisdom of ease. The recognition that life does not have to be as hard as we make it. That peace is available not at the end of a long journey, but right here, right now, in the simple willingness to let things be. A Zen master was once asked to summarize the entire teaching in a few words. He said simply, "Not always so. Not always so." Whatever we believe, whatever we fear, whatever we are certain about, it is not always so. Life is more fluid, more changeable, more full of possibility than our fixed ideas can capture. When we remember this, when we hold everything with a light touch, we find ease. Another master, asked the same question, replied, "Attention. Attention. Attention. Just this. Just paying attention to what is actually here. Not to our stories about what is here. Not to our judgments or fears or hopes. Just to this moment, this breath, this experience. When we pay attention this way, life becomes simple, beautiful, enough. In the hours and days ahead, notice when you are fighting with life. Notice when you are insisting that things should be different, that circumstances should change, that people should behave other than they do. And in those moments, see if you can soften. Not to give up on what matters to you, but to release the tight grip of resistance. To say, perhaps, to say, we shall see. To find the flow that moves around obstacles rather than crashing against them. When uncertainty arises, when you do not know how things will turn out, see if you can rest in that not knowing. See if you can trust that you will meet each moment as it comes, that you have always found your way before, and that you will find it again. And when you notice the heaviness of your own expectations, your own demands on life, see if you can set them down. See if you can return to the simplicity of this moment, this breath, this gentle experience of being alive. Life is flowing. It has always been flowing. It will continue to flow long after our small concerns have been forgotten. We can fight the current, or we can trust it. We can struggle, or we can rest. We can grip tightly, or we can open our hands and let the water carry us home. Rest now in the flow of this moment, and when you are ready, we will come gently to a close. We have walked a long path together. We have visited palaces where demons shrank under the warmth of welcome. We have sat with monks in mountain monasteries, learning patience from those who tested us most. We have felt the weight of cups held too long and discovered the freedom of setting them down. We have learned to wrap difficult truths in kindness. We have made friends with ourselves, perhaps for the first time. We have risen from wells on the very dirt meant to bury us. And we have found the ease that comes when we stop fighting the river and let it carry us home. These teachings are not meant to be memorized or mastered. They are seeds planted gently in the soil of your heart. Some may sprout tomorrow. Some may take years. Some may bloom in ways you cannot yet imagine. There is no need to hold tightly to any of it. The wisdom that is meant for you will stay. The rest will fall away like leaves in autumn, making room for new growth. The Buddha said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. You have always carried this peace. It was never missing, only forgotten. Beneath the noise of worry, beneath the weight of struggle, beneath all the difficulty you have ever faced, it has been waiting. Patient, quiet, unshakable. May you rest in this peace tonight and always. May you be gentle with yourself and others. May you flow with life, trusting where it leads. And may you know, in your deepest heart, that you are already whole. You are already home. You are already enough. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.